challenge. I ended up working for a venture fund here in town and one of their portfolio companies, and was coached by a professor that I was close with to come back and launch our fund to help launch more companies at the university. I will state flatly that I stand on the shoulders of giants, right? I can't take credit for a lot of what we've accomplished at Polsky. We had a great tailwind when I showed up, and now we're trying to figure out how to expand that across a broader swath of our kids. So a big difference, again, talk about standing on the shoulders of giants. I didn't actually build our incubator. I was part of the team that did, but we were lucky to poach a classmate of mine from Booth, Kristen Baird, who was part of the original team at Accelerate, now Techstars Chicago, and then again the original team at 1871. So as soon as I knew heard she was available, I told her about the photos I kept from college, and she was going to have to come work with me whether or not she wanted to. If anyone wants to talk to her about her experience building an incubator, happy to connect directly. Anyway, so U Chicago has generally in the past, we were the ivory tower of ivory towers, right? We were very focused on early discovery, but we had a history of developing really interesting technologies. I will say, very envious of our colleagues to the north and our colleagues down in Urbana-Champaign. We don't have an engineering school, so most of our discoveries have been in base science, materials, life sciences, etc. But of tremendous value, just potentially, I think they have been harder for us to tap into, and the researchers that had been working at campus have been less interested in entrepreneurship, specifically more technology transfer. So that was kind of the base that we started with when I was on campus. However, that has changed rapidly. I think most of you have talked about seeing this on your campus. Students more and more are interested in challenging problems, right? They want to get into entrepreneurship. More and more, I think they're looking at really exciting, quote unquote, deep technologies that they think can have a broader impact. And those researchers are also interested in building companies as opposed to just signing something off to AbbVie and then hoping it becomes something different. So what we've tried to do, I think similar to the map you put up for info, we have a similar flavor. I don't pretend that there's any particular equation that lets you build these things, but we've tried to marshal resources in specific areas where we think we can get the most lift and where we've had the most success. One, education. So, again, the Polsky Center existed long before I got there, and it has built a tremendous track record in entrepreneurship education, as well as things like the NBC that have started to generate a number of companies. Venture support, which is what we're trying to build as much of now as we possibly can. So what are the things we need to help you do? What are the risks we need to help you take off the table to build your company out? The incubator is a big portion of that. Licensing, which we've started to change some of our policies to make it a bit friendlier and faster. And then industry relations to invite other partners to the table, right? They'll have resources that we don't outside of the space that we offer. Well, what's actually in that space that's of value that we can do? So again, to toot our horn, one interesting note here, when I got to Booth, I think I heard someone mention that most of their undergrads or most of their students at Northwestern go to become consultants or bankers. That has also been the case at Booth. However, our number one concentration now is entrepreneurship. Right? So I think the NBC drove a lot of this. But now most of our students come in saying, at the very least, I have 2 years to take a shot on goal. I can try to build something. If it fails, so be it. Goal will be on campus next week. Right? But what do I do in between now and then? So we've launched a number of things that are really new for us, but I think many of you have already. Right? There was our comp sci department was very undergrad focused. There was nothing for Booth students or grad students to really engage with. So we've started courses like application development, not to make engineers, but to make Booth students that know how to talk to an engineer. Right? How do you go find a technical? We have other programs that provide other avenues for those entrepreneurs that maybe don't have their idea. So there's a great one called Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. This is some of you may have heard of the search fund model. I go convince a few people with deep pockets to fund me for 2 years while I go look for a great business to buy, and then it's like a mini private equity, right? All of my upside is tied into a company that I buy. Can I actually grow it? Can I make it operate more effectively? And then can I turn around and sell? So there's a bunch of different paths that we have started to see. Impact investing is also very big at Chicago Booth and the university more broadly. We have a bunch of departments that have now tied into the Booth School of Business. And we have something called the Social Venture Challenge, which has started to generate a ton of really interesting companies, one of which ballot ready, hopefully some of you have heard of in the past election. It was the first time you could bring your full ballot into the ballot box on your phone, so you could actually do your research ahead of time, all the way down to your local judge, pick who you wanted to vote for, and have that ready for you while you're looking at the almost indecipherable ballot. So the reason why I'm jumping from space to space, one is to be cognizant of time. I get my clock up here. Two is to show, I think we we have a bit of a different flavor at University of Chicago because of some of the things that we didn't have when I came on board. Again, most of the early entrepreneurship activity you see tends to be out of engineering schools. And given that we had this pull from other parts of the university and we don't have an engineering school, what we had is a great Center for Entrepreneurship and Blue School of Business, and we didn't have any other centers of entrepreneurship, which I think is a hindrance in some ways, but in some ways enabled us to reach out more broadly with less friction. So I think you had mentioned you're under the provost, so were we when I first came on board. And we also built our accelerator off campus broadly. We're a couple blocks to the north, so we're right there. But that actually let us invite everyone in and kind of break through some of the noise and break through some of the silos. So we found that when we did stuff on campus at the Harper Center, for whatever reason, many people either felt that they weren't invited or were scared to walk in. Right? You find that researchers really don't like to be in positions where they're not smart, because they're very smart at what they do. Right? If you're the best in the world, you don't want to go play in an area where you're going to be number 4,322. It's a ding to the ego. So by opening up an entirely new facility, we could bring people in that we knew wanted to engage, but weren't really comfortable doing it on someone else's terms. So because of that, we built a community with speed. I think a speed that has kind of befuddled us, frankly. We went from 0 to, we're closing in on 4,000 members now, 20% of which are actually community members, which is pretty unique for an accelerator space over the course of 2 years. So it really has picked up steam. And a lot of those teams are, again, from those non-traditional tracks that we were hoping to tap into, but we're expecting, in year 5, when we had a lot of success, maybe we can start to pull them in. But I have 2 teams that sit across the aisle from me that are life sciences teams, right? And it's one postdoc who worked for me, and a Booth student, and a researcher who are now raising funding and spinning out a company, which again is, I think, reasonably new for us in Chicago. So again, I think most of you have probably heard of the New Venture Challenge. What we have found is when we try to look at how we're building our system, we look for those tent poles that we can drift on, right? And the NVC being the big one for us. We've spun up. Gosh, I don't think I've been up there. Let's call it 600 companies over the course of the NVC. 150 of which or so are still operating. About 600 million have been raised by those companies, and 4 billion in exits over the past 20 years. So it's been, many of the names, Grubhub, Braintree, but there's a raft of other names, Simple Mills, an up-and-coming consumer brand, so keep your eye out for that one. If you're a Whole Foods shopper, I have 4 young kids. I'm not, because I can't afford that with 4 young kids. But if you are, take a look for their products. They're doing fantastically well. And we've also been recently recognized as one of the top accelerators in the country. It's not my deck, unfortunately. I'm pinch hitting for Kristen, so the order is not familiar. Grubhub has done fantastically well. I think a number of you pointed to bringing the alumni back on campus, which we have found has been also hugely valuable. Telling those failure stories is very useful, right? Giving these young kids permission to not be right every single time, right? If you have an offer from a big hit in your back pocket, that can do 2 things. One, you can become very risk averse, or you can become risk taking, right? Either know you have a backstop, or you're concerned to mess it up. I think when I first got there, it was more of the latter. Braintree recently, another big win. Thankfully, he's become a very giving individual broadly, and funded something that helps support our entrepreneurs after they graduate. So essentially, we have the Polsky Founders Fund. It essentially covers a very small amount, a stipend a month for a year, to help you go figure out if your company can be a thing. Basically, let's take rent and ramen off the table, and if those are not a concern, can you actually build something? Checking the time. I do speak very quickly, so jump in with questions if you're so inclined. And I'm just trying to rush through to get you guys. I don't want to stand between you and Blue Mountain audience for those that are not up here in Chicago. So most recently we built this exchange, right? So this was the first initial offshoot when I joined. We built a fund and a space at the same time. Using the fund is a way to attract these researchers in. Okay, here's a pool of money, but you're going to have to do something to prove that you can actually build a company in your technology. The space was the first place that invited them all in to come connect with people from across campus, because you cannot build these things alone, at least at any sufficient scale or of any sufficient import, right? So how do we connect you with the grad student at Booth, the law student, the postdoc from someone else's lab that actually care about doing this, right? Because that's the price of entry. I can't make any of these things happen. We just try to build the ecosystem, the happy collisions whereby these teams can form. So we've launched a number of programs that have really started to bear fruit. One is called the Collaboratorium. I would say it's probably not too far from a social fuse, frankly. It's not rocket science. We have more scientific bent, as it were. It's less, students don't present, the researchers do. Hi, I'm a researcher from such and such department. I have a brand new way to look at mammography. This is actually a case that happened when I was at Booth. 2 Booth students saw it, so that's actually great technology. One of us randomly has a background. We worked for Philips before we came back. This is potentially game-changing. Let's join forces. Took through a number of programs at Booth. Eventually that culminated in the NBC. They took second place, raised a round of funding. Just heard last week they have their formal 510K approval from the FDA and are waiting now on their de novo approval, at which point they will be the only product that's allowed to say you do computer-assisted diagnosis for mammography. So a big win, a long time of brewing. I graduated in 2011. They are just getting FDA approval today, but a big win nonetheless. And again, that started from students who wanted to do something with a researcher that had that thing, and how do we find the path out together? So again, opening up these doors was less about us having 50,000 companies that needed a place to hang their hat, and it certainly isn't I know the numbers. It's not a rent play. It's these things are gestating. They have nowhere for it to happen. How do we support it now that this stuff is already happening because of these? Our next phase is this innovation project, right? So this is, hopefully our legacy to the university. Because of all this activity, we've now gotten to a place that I think many of you had mentioned. The wet lab space becomes a real problem, right? I have multiple life sciences startups now who we've done a ton of work early on with them, and we're excited and proud of what they've accomplished. But now we either have to build this or they have to go elsewhere. There's really nowhere left for them to go, right? They've gotten through the work that they can do in their lab. We've tried to make space on campus in some cases. We've been as creative as we can. But now, they're going to run a phase 1 clinical trial, and that can't be done, at the university. There's public usage. There's all kinds of issues you've got to deal with, and once out logos are being announced shortly. My apologies. Wipe that from your brains. You'll see that next week. But hopefully that will become peppered with more logos, right? We've prided ourselves at the exchange, most recently at Chicago, now broadly, in trying to play as well as we can with others, and to kind of put our foot out there, our neck out there sometimes, to engage with the community, to engage with other partners, to see how we can help each other. Because again, we talked about brain drain. Chicago is sadly in a net brain drain loss position to the coast. So the way that we fight that isn't necessarily rebuilding the valley, but doing what we do best here and doing it at scale. So if any of you would like to talk about how to engage with this project as we grow, please don't be shy, and I'll connect you with the right people on campus. So this will include laboratory space. It will include a large. We've spent a lot of time now flying around the country looking at these other spaces. What has worked well for them? And not all that will work well for us, but some of it we think will be critical to the success of the space. And one of it is, again, having multiple parties in the space, and then we have one dedicated large floor, which is kind of open to all, right? So you can imagine one large building. It's almost like 2 towers connected by one floor, where it's everyone is invited to play outside of the dedicated office space. We think that's critical to connect these partners. Yes, sir, please.
Will you also have dedicated private lab spaces?
Correct. Yeah. It's not too far from, say, a Lab Central model, right? There will be different flavors depending upon what those individuals need, right? So for the one grad student, one researcher startup, it's one bench. As they grow, it's something larger. And we've seen this now with some of the companies that have incubated at Exchange, and that we potentially we have funded some of them through the Innovation Fund. The needs just change rapidly. And I think our Exchange, the existing center, will stay focused exclusively that first year of life. It's what we've been the best at. Right? All the educational programming on campus is really around kind of customer discovery, those things that those risks you're trying to retire when you're trying to figure out, could this be a thing? Right? As it grows and as we move into this new space, now this will be for a different set of companies, right? They should have already shown that there's a need, right? They should have already done the thoughtful planning around what comes next. And most of them will have raised some sort of capital, because you will have to pay for these desks. Right? We charge nominal fees for a lot of what we do, so members have to pay a small amount. Students are exempted, existing faculty are exempted. The student that starts a business and stays after they graduate has to pay a fee, and that the fees are very small, but that's almost like it's just a sign of commitment, right? So all of our incubator desks, we charge, I want to say $400 a month for 2 desks inside our incubator space at the Exchange. That's almost nothing given the costs of building and maintaining that space. But again, that says I'm actually going to be here. I'm going to sit here every day. I'm building a company, and if $200 is too much, that means that I'm actually not that serious. That's not that much. I mean, I don't plan on going. Yes, please.
Is there a time limit as to how long teams can be at the exchange? Or
Yes, that's another great question, because I firmly believe, even I'm not an engineer, I believe in forcing functions, right? Make them commit to doing something, and that's another thing that plays in. So generally it's a 6-month stint. You can re-up for 6 months, but you've got to come in and talk to us around what your goals are, how things are going. The exceptions to that have been the teams that have not been getting traction but are working like crazy. So generally the teams that aren't working very hard, aren't getting any traction, those are easy to walk out the door. And frankly, they know before you show, right? They kind of avoid 6-month conversation, or don't schedule via the email. The teams that are doing great, generally we're trying to graduate them out, right? Okay, you've outgrown us, fantastic. We've had a number of those teams. Silco Watch was a great one. They were a team that they originally started building a product for health centers in Africa because they could never find their inventory, right? So they built a voice-based system because they do not have access to a ton of internet. To say, okay, what medicines do you have? When's their expiration date? Hey, we have an outbreak over here. What do we have in our network that we can move over there? So give the analytics to the people back at the home base. Turns out incredibly valuable for CPG companies because the logistics and last mile problem in Africa are just as bad, or if not worse, for them. They grew so fast that 3 months in we said, okay, the clock is actually ticking because you went from 2 people, now you're 8. 6 months in we said, okay, you can't have all of the incubator. If you have 40, you need to go in school. So those conversations are also easy. It's the people in the middle that are complicated. I'm working like crazy, but it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. And I think those are also where we're often proven wrong. We just had a team, Banyan, that took, I think, 3rd in the New Venture Challenge and is about to be funded by a large local VC with a national scope, whose name I can't mention yet, but I think that will be signed shortly. And we almost kicked them out twice. Right? They were working like crazy, but no one cared. And it was those hard conversations of, okay, you guys, you got to try something new, you got to try something new. And they just kept after it. And they will hopefully prove me glorious later on. Please.
You mentioned having 4,000 members. Can
Yeah.
you characterize that a little bit of that, a significant portion of that paid or unpaid? Are you coaching all 4,000, which seems overwhelming, of being able to have those individual discussions of the progress of your
Yeah. So it's, there's always gradations among like how engaged they are, what they're using the space for, and I'm sure everyone sees this across your different spaces. So of those 4,000, it is a very broad spectrum, and that was intentional, right? It's faculty, students, staff, postdocs, alumni. It is a really broad spread, 20% of which, as I said, are community members, right? So it is a pretty diverse place, and we think that actually that pays off. Even Banyan was actually started by a booth student and a non-university affiliated person who lives on the south side, who was incubating it, or who was a member in our space. Which again, we hope to see more of this, but early indications are that they are engaging in ways we would not have expected. All community members get access to all of our programming that is not for credit, right? So things that are for credit that are actually a course that's being run, again, there's nothing I can do about that. That's run by the university broadly as part of their curriculum. Everything else aside from that, which is the vast majority of what we do, probably 90%, I would say, it's all extracurricular, air quotes, and all community members can get into any of those programs. A lot of our programs are application-based, but not all. So some are just show up if you're interested, some are apply, and again, those applications usually focus on intent, less than any particular background, right? Do you actually care to do this or not? Which seems to be the best indicator of success. Yes, sir.
Have you found that those members come in whole teams, or are they looking for additional members?
Yeah, so that huge variance around that. There's a number of fully formed teams that just pop up out of nowhere. Those, I think, most often come either out of the business school or the community, right? They've got 3 people, they're building something, they want some support, they want advice, they need access to tools, resources, mentors, etc. However, I think more and more of our programming is built around this early team formation. And I would just hazard that forming teams is nigh impossible. Creating programs that help teams form is much, much easier. Like I always get to, and I'm sure all of you will get this, as soon as the day this space opens, any of your spaces open, or if you're not getting this already, you will have researchers that say, I need a business student and a law student because I want to go build this company. And we say, okay, we used to try to do that, unmitigated nightmare, so now here's the collaboratorium. You go get in front of 300 grad students, which is about what we get at each time, and convince them that they should engage, and then talk to 40 of them. And by the way, even then I tell them all, it's really a try and buy situation. You know, your mileage will vary. Here's a program, we use the I-Corps as the world's best stalking horse for this. It's a great program generally, but hey, go work with those 4 students that you think are awesome. 2 of them will decide after 2 weeks that it's not worth their time and disappear. Like it will stop responding to emails or answering phone calls. And of the final 2, you need to decide which of them you actually care to work with. Because it's like a mini marriage, right? You're committing potentially 7 years and lots of money and time to go work with this person. So be sure that you know them. And we do that with a number of the programs that we have. So we try to, and oftentimes it takes multiple shots on goal, right? They'll go through the I-Corps, they'll go through another program, each time with a different set of students until something gels.